Good morning, everyone. Thank you very much for joining us nice and early. We're just going to wait a couple more minutes for some extra attendees to join. So make sure you've got a cup of tea or your lunch or your dinner, depending on where you are, and we will be with you very shortly. Good morning, everyone. We're going to kick off about now. We've still got people filtering through, but it's just gone 9 o'clock on a Monday morning for us, or 10 o'clock or 11 o'clock, depending on where you are. So good morning / afternoon. Thank you very much for joining us today. This is the first in the week-long session for Virtual Light and Build. Obviously, we can't be at Light and Build at the moment for obvious reasons, so we wanted to bring it to you through a virtual format. We've got a lot of content to cover this week, and we're really excited to have you here. So without further ado, I'm going to hand you over to Alan Jackson, who's going to be walking us through Wellbeing and the WELL Standard this morning. I believe we'll probably have time for questions at the end. However, if there's an urgent question, you do also have the option to raise your hand through this webinar, little hand icon. So do that and we'll see it flag up. So yes, over to Alan.
Morning, everyone. As Sam said, this is the first in a series of webinars, and we're going to start with Wellbeing and the WELL Standard in the design of buildings, and how we can use technology and lighting intelligence in particular to improve efficiency, but in this webinar, the health and well-being of the people using the spaces. So let's start with looking at what is WELL. So WELL is about, getting well is about influencing, understanding what elements of the environment positively impact your health and well-being in the workplace. Luckily for us, it's defined in the WELL Standard. There are 10 concepts in the WELL Standard, and even if a building is not going for WELL certification, these 10 concepts are well worth using in the design of spaces within buildings. So firstly, there's air, so making sure that we have good quality air to breathe. Water, making sure that we have access to clean water to stay healthy. Nourishment, making sure that there's good healthy food, of course. Light, which is our specialism, which is actually essential for life. Movement, so making sure that employees or people in factories or schools or whatever have the ability to move around and keep their bodies healthy. Thermal comfort, having the right temperature, being too hot or too cold is just not good for you. Sound, too much sound or lack of sound can have an impact on our performance. The materials we use in the design of buildings is more and more coming into play as we see workspaces coming into the 21st century. Mind, So being healthy, having a healthy mind, being able to cope with the day-to-day issues in the workplace, and if you can't, knowing where to find help, and community. We're social beings, so having places where we can spend time with other people and talk to other people about work or other things. So these 10 concepts, and my own experience is that if you see a building where these concepts have been taken into consideration, maybe alongside BREEAM or LEED, the outcome is stark compared to those buildings which haven't taken these into consideration. For our own thoughts, we know that building services are converging, that the building services have traditionally been put into the buildings separately, but technology is such that we can now, using technology, bring some of these services together. And we'll have a look at that more tomorrow in tomorrow's webinar. But just to make the point now that with technology, we can start to influence many of these concepts of well-being for the benefit of the end users through technology. So, can lighting and technology positively impact health and well-being? You're damn right it can. And that's what we're going to discuss from here on in. So we as human beings are intrinsically linked to lighting. Our bodies are optimized to respond to different light at different times of day, whether that's going to sleep when it gets dark, or waking up when it gets light, or responding to different color temperatures as signals of what we're going to do, what we should do. Because as we know, light isn't just there to help us see, it affects our mood and it affects our well-being. There's more and more research going into how lighting affects human beings. Helvar in particular spends a lot of time looking into this, how it affects our concentration, maybe in the workplace or in the learning place, how it affects our emotions, our sleep patterns, and our natural biorhythms. And as we know, jet lag is a good example of how a change in lighting conditions, a change in light compared to time, can affect your natural biorhythms and therefore have an impact on sleep, your concentration, and emotions. We know now that we respond to light in two different ways. The normal visual way, so light enables us to see. In our eye, there's the light sensitive rods and the color sensitive cones. However, our eyes respond to light in a different way, at a more intrinsic level. So in our eye, there's these fantastic things called intrinsically photosensitive retinal ganglion cells, and they are only there, they have no visual impact whatsoever. They're only there to react color temperature of light, and they contribute or suppress the hormone level melatonin, which regulates the sleep-wake cycle. As I mentioned, there's no visual impact whatsoever. They're there to control our behavior, to control our mood. And that's why dynamic lighting in indoor spaces, not just for the visual aspect, but through the color temperature and color aspect, can really impact how people feel and therefore impact their learning, their productivity, and how they feel in indoor spaces. So as a summary to that part, a reminder that we've got the rods and the cones in our eyes, which are there to sense the difference between light and dark and colors. But we also have these intrinsically photosensitive retinal ganglion cells, which are there to control our mood and our well-being. So we can now see that light has a visual impact, so that we can look around and perceive our environment and get on with our daily lives. There's an emotional impact, so the interplay of light and color, and that affects your mood. There's a biological impact, so if our circadian rhythms are affected, that affects our health and well-being. And then there's an energy efficiency impact. So if we have enough natural light in the room, we should only have enough natural light to go about our business, not too much, not too little. For best practice, we should always, of course, use natural daylight. Access to natural daylight is really important. What we see is through our normal lives that we go outside, and on a sunny day, there's maybe 90,000 or 100,000 lux. On a cloudy day, there's up to 1,000 lux. And then we go inside, and there's 500-600 lux indoors. And we spend a lot of our time indoors, especially in the winter. So here, we should maximize the use of natural light. And we should try and make it dynamic. Especially in winter months, we can go from fixed lighting environment to fixed lighting environment all day long. And the next part of our presentation really is about making sure that we utilize dynamic lighting in the workplace wherever possible. DALI allows us to do this very simply. DALI is the industry standard lighting protocol. And with DALI type 8, that gives us with one address the ability to modify light intensity, light color temperature, and the color of lighting in the workplace. And we can use, for example, the Helvar router system to make sure that throughout the day there's dynamic lighting, so changing intensity, color temperature throughout the day to make it more natural. And this has a really positive impact on the health and well-being of people in the workplace, but also their learning ability and their productivity. We should always make sure, for example, with task lighting in the workplace, that we have the right light at the right time for the people and the tasks they're using, whether that's in a factory or a school. And we can use different technology to enable us to do that. We can use sensors to switch lights on and off when we need them, switch them off when we don't need them, to modify the light compared to the ambient lighting conditions. We can use a light over time feature, for example, which is to bring dynamic lighting into the indoor environment to modify intensity and color temperature throughout the day. And we can also have different types of control, whether that's time-based scheduling or through panels or sensors. So what we can now see is that we can use dynamic lighting, which is not fixed lighting, in indoor environments to help people relax. For example, in healthcare environments, we would use a lower intensity, warmer light to make people relax there. To energize people in the workplace, we would have a higher intensity, cool white light to make them feel energized. We would use sensor technology in working environments, for example, to always make sure that there's a fixed lux level on the working plane, to make sure that people are always working to the best of their ability. And then to improve productivity, we would use, again, a higher intensity cool white, but not for too long. If you have that for too long, it can be quite damaging. To make the point that really to understand how spaces are used, sensing technology is absolutely crucial. And what we find in modern buildings is that lighting sensors are the most prevalent sensors in rooms. And we can use those lighting sensors to give occupancy data and use that occupancy data in different ways to improve productivity, to improve efficiency, and to improve well-being. So if we have a look how we do that, first, through the sensing technology, we have to collect the data to understand what's happening in the space. We then need to create value from that data. Data itself is not much use if we haven't created any value from it at all. Once we've refined that data and created value from it, we can use it to interact with other building services. So we could use a lighting sensor, for example, to detect occupancy data, to work out when spaces within the building are being used, and then use that occupancy data to impact how the climate control system, for example, is being used, or to feed back to the room booking system. But ultimately, the use of sensors in the well-being is to really positively impact how those spaces are being used and to make sure that they're set up optimally for anyone using that space. As an example, this is a building in Copenhagen. It's actually by a company called Louis Poulsen. And a couple of years ago, they were looking for a new headquarters where they could showcase their products, their services, and their solutions. And they worked with Helvar and our partner in Denmark to make sure that this building was somewhere that their employees would want to be, but also where their customers would want to be. And we can see that by using DALI in every single luminaire, DALI Type 8, they were able to really have a flexible design which allowed them to move walls around, to change the use of spaces. They have different levels of control. In the rooms, they might have manual control through panels on the wall. It's also automated through time scheduling. And we're also utilizing DALI Type 8, as I said, to make sure that we have intensity control and color temperature control. In the open plan offices, there is manual control for each individual workspace, but you can see on the right-hand side of the picture that there's lots of natural light here. But we're also using a product called Light Over Time by Helvar, which very, very subtly throughout the day changes intensity and color temperature to make the environment more natural. So we're really bringing the outside to the indoor space. And the feedback from the people using the space is that it's a really natural and comfortable place to be. We're also utilizing the maintenance and management, the monitoring features of DALI. So DALI gives you a lot of feedback if there's a lamp failure, device failure, and our partner in Denmark is monitoring this site to make sure that it's always working to its maximum potential. But what we really wanted to achieve and what we set out to achieve was, of course, an energy efficient building, but a building where people got the best user experience, where they felt energized in the workplace at all times of day, and where they had positively impact on their health and well-being. And Louis Poulsen this year have just introduced an app which each of their employees can feed back how they feel about the workplace. So at the beginning, I mentioned the concepts of well-being, light being one of them. And what we can really see is that intelligent lighting and technology is intrinsically linked to the health and well-being of people using indoor spaces. With intelligent lighting, we can modify intensity, color temperature, and color in the indoor environment, making it more natural. Through standardization, DALI, for example, we can guarantee interoperability of building services. We can guarantee interoperability of products, which reduces maintenance and makes maintenance easier. And standardization also makes sure that the longevity of the building is secure, that this is a sustainable solution going forwards. So to summarize, we love natural light. We're human beings, of course we do. In the indoor environment, let's make sure that we've got the right light at the right time for people and tasks, and we can utilize technology to ensure that happens. Use human-centric lighting. In other words, use dynamic lighting. Avoid fixed lighting where possible in indoor environments. Using technology, using intelligent lighting does have a positive impact on health and well-being in indoor spaces. And when designing spaces, of course, the WELL standard sits alongside LEED and BREEAM and other building certifications. But try and put health and well-being first in the design. And even if you're not going for WELL certification in the space, you can do a lot worse than start with those 10 concepts in your thoughts. So from Helvar, intelligent lighting and smart sensing really brings insight and control into the space. It improves efficiency, it improves energy management potential, and it improves well-being. And that is the end of the first webinar from Helvar this week. There's plenty more to come. So now we're ready for any questions.
Perfect, thank you very much. So we've got a couple of questions here already. Let's just pick one out from the top. So what kind of other building services would you expect to merge most with lighting solutions then? Is the first one.
So far, the most popular one, if I say the most popular one, is the climate control system. So before LED came along, lighting was one of the biggest users of energy in buildings. Sometimes up to 25% of energy consumption in buildings was lighting. But now with the advent of LED, that's in some cases come down to maybe 5%. So we find now that climate control systems tend to be the biggest user of energy. And because, especially if you're going for LEED or BREEAM, there are lighting sensors in most rooms. You can start to use that occupancy data to drive down energy consumption with the climate control system. And if you tune in tomorrow, that's what tomorrow's webinar is all about.
Okay, we've got a question here. Let's move the screen a little bit closer. Can we change CCT as per sun in indoor through sensors?
I'm not sure I fully understand the question, but I think it's, can we change color temperature control through sensors? There aren't too many solutions out there in the market right now, but there's a mad rush by pretty much every single lighting manufacturer on the planet to get that in place quickly. Because of course, we have to be using more dynamic lighting in the workplace, but really the technology has to make sense. So we really have to make sense of how would a sensor change the color temperature within the room based on ambient conditions maybe. Helvar is working on it, but a lot of other manufacturers are working on it as well.
Okay, the next question. In WELL Standard, how many points Helvar control strategies can contribute?
I think there's, of the 10, we can positively impact through technology 4. And I mentioned those at the beginning. But what you'll find if you go out and talk to people is that they're most interested in the interoperability of our intelligent lighting control system with the other building services. And the primary one is that climate control system. So in warmer climates, maybe in Asia, Middle East, you'll find there's a lot of HVAC. And that has a huge drain on energy. But also in the Northern Hemisphere, in winter with the heating, that also has a huge drain on energy. So even though we can impact other building services, that the climate control system is the one that people most want to know about.
Okay, next one from Matt. Can Helvar share some of the studies on circadian rhythm, etc.?
Hi, Matt. Yes, actually, I was talking to Henry Juslan, who's our genius in Finland, and he shared 4 studies with me last week, and I'll send you those 4 studies in raw format, but the idea is that Henry and I are going to sit down and put these in a more readable format. But I'll send you the studies as they are, Matt.
Okay, the next one. Can we acquire occupancy data from the Helvar Imagine line of products?
Absolutely. So the PIR sensors, also the microwave sensors, as you know, in an Imagine system are connected to the router. So we know when that PIR or microwave has been triggered. So you can get that access from the router itself. But equally, you can also share that data with the building automation, building management system through Niagara, BACnet, or HelvarNet.
Superb. Right, the next one. How much better productivity can be gained through better lighting? So what's the productivity gain that we can look to see with lighting controls?
Actually, there are some studies out there, and they give varying answers. Then I think there needs to be more studies, but it's somewhere between 1 and 12%, which maybe isn't that helpful. But I think this is a new area for this industry where we're moving from designing buildings for buildings' sake to designing buildings that really are for the people using those buildings. So there are more and more studies, and there is more and more studies on the positive impact of lighting on productivity. So watch this space, and we'll see more studies coming out.
Okay, the last question that we've got on here, what is the difference between data and insights?
That's a good question. So data is just ones and zeros. It's just data. Insight Actually, I'm going to be really cheeky, and maybe if can I go back a couple of slides? There's two slides I showed here. So data is what you're collecting from the digital systems that are in place. It's ones and zeros, basically. Insight is what you've got after you've created value from that data. So insight could be sharing when spaces within buildings are being used or not being used with other building services. So it's about the value of the data rather than the data itself.
Super. Right, we've got one here. How does circadian rhythm lighting design suits fit variable industry types and countries? For example, is an international formula in existence?
There's no standard, if that's what international formula is meant, but there are different circadian rhythm templates that can be tried out in different scenarios. And in fact, our Imagine system has some templates that can be used. But as far as I know, there's no international standard, there's no international formula.
Okay, and the final one we've got here, so it looks like everyone's asked their questions, but the last one, has building services already merged with BMS? What's new here?
Right, so tomorrow's webinar is all about this. That there is an area or a level of integration, building management system. It really is a case of that building services are still in the main put in as separate silos, and building services tend to be the remit of the integrator. What we're moving towards is a more interoperable world where devices within rooms and within buildings are talking to each other and sharing information without the need for another layer above, which is called systems integration. But again, you need to tune in tomorrow and we'll spend an hour on that.
That leads us on very nicely indeed. So that's all the questions I think we've got now. Thank you to Alan for covering this off today. As he very rightly says, if you tune in tomorrow at 9 AM GMT, we'll be covering off intelligent buildings and smart sensing. So that leads perfectly on. But yeah, unless there's anything else, the questions have died down. So a big thank you to everyone for taking the time out of your day to join us. And we hope that this has been quite insightful. Of course, if you do have any questions after this, you can of course contact the marketing@helvar.com email, or contact us through the website, or contact one of your partner managers, etc. But yeah, so that's all from us this morning. A big thank you to everyone, and we will hopefully see you first thing tomorrow as well. Thanks very much.